Chapter 1. The Night the Archives Stopped Breathing. It begins with a breath, not the soft, polite inhale of a sleeping guard, not the wind threading through the bronze doors of St. Peter's. This is a slow, deliberate exhale that comes from inside solid travertine stone at exactly 3:33 a.m. The sound is wet, intimate, as if something on the other side of the wall has been holding that breath for 77 years and has finally decided to let it go. Elena Moretti hears it first on the night of 14th of October, 2024. She is 32, newly appointed to the Archivum Sacratum Apostolicum, and still foolish enough to believe that history is a quiet thing. She has been granted the rarest privilege a lay scholar can receive: unrestricted access to the lowest levels of the Vatican secret archives after midnight, when the tourists, the cardinals, even most of the Swiss Guard have gone to bed. The reason is simple. Cardinal Gregorio Lamberti is dying, and he has asked for a pair of young eyes that still believe in facts. Elena's eyes are sharp, her Italian flawless, her atheism absolute, perfect. She descends alone. The iron elevator that serves the hypogeum stops at level 4, with a sigh that sounds almost human. Below that, the only way down is a narrow spiral staircase built for men in robes who lived before electric light. The air changes with every turn. At 5, it grows colder. At 6, it tastes of iron and candle smoke that should have burned out centuries ago. At 7, the staircase simply ends. There is no landing, no sign, no plaque, only a rough-hewn corridor cut into volcanic tuff, lit by a single red bulb that flickers like a dying heartbeat. Elena's authorization badge, laminated, signed by the prefect himself, does not grant access here. The magnetic reader is dead, yet the gate is already open, swung inward on silent hinges, as though someone knew she was coming. She steps through. The temperature drops another 4 degrees. Her breath fogs, hangs, refuses to rise. The corridor is 20 meters long and ends in a wall of black basalt that has no business being under Rome. No doors, no markings, only the faint smell of myrrh and something coppery underneath. Elena takes out her phone to record a voice memo, standard procedure for anything off the official map. The screen shows 03.3258. She begins to speak. Level -7, unauthorized corridor, basalt terminus, 3:33. The exhale comes. It is not loud. It is intimate. It starts deep in the stone, travels through the rock like a sigh through lungs, and leaves the air tasting of old blood and cold milk. Elena's words die in her throat. The red bulb steadies, then brightens, as though the stone itself has inhaled light. She stands frozen for 7 full seconds. 7 seconds is long enough for the rational mind to invent 100 explanations: ventilation shafts, geothermal pressure, a prank by the night staff. 7 seconds is also long enough for the body to know none of those explanations are true. She forces herself forward until her forehead almost touches the basalt. It is warm, not sun warm, fever warm. She raises her flashlight. The beam cuts a perfect circle on the wall. Inside the circle, there is nothing. No cracks, no seams, no hidden hinges, just black stone polished to a wet-looking sheen. Elena reaches out with her left hand, her dominant hand, and lays her palm flat against the rock. The exhale answers her. This time it is inside her chest, A pressure, gentle but undeniable, pushes outward from her sternum, as if something behind her ribs wants to borrow her lungs for a moment. Her palm sticks, not glued. Flesh remembers. She pulls back with a soft, wet sound. The flashlight trembles. She turns it off to save battery. Darkness swallows everything, and in the darkness, the wall blooms. A handprint appears directly in front of her face, 5 fingers splayed, wrist arched, lifeline and heartline perfect. It is the exact size and shape of Elena's own left hand. The blood is fresh. It drips once, twice, onto the toe of her shoe. Elena does not scream. She is a scholar. She observes. The blood is warm. She fumbles the flashlight back on. The handprint is gone. But the smell of myrrh is stronger now, and beneath it the unmistakable scent of a newborn's scalp. Somewhere above her, 5, 6, 7 levels above, Rome sleeps under autumn rain. Down here, something else has just woken up. Elena backs away until her shoulders hit the open gate. She does not run. Running would mean admitting fear, and fear is not part of her contract. She forces herself to speak into the phone again, voice low and steady. Note for the record, level -7 terminates in basalt wall, temperature anomaly +4 degrees Celsius, unidentified respiratory sound at 0.333, possible hemoglobin residue, self-contamination, unlikely. She stops the recording. Only then does she look at her left palm. There, in perfect negative, is the mirror image of the print that was on the wall. The lines are raised, white, bloodless, as if the stone has taken an impression of her future. Elena closes her fist. Far away, in the cardinal's private apartment above the Cortile della Pina, Gregorio Lamberti opens his eyes in the dark. He has not slept properly in 61 years. He whispers a single sentence into the silence, the same sentence he has whispered every night since 1963. She's here, and somewhere deeper than any map has ever reached, something that has waited beneath St. Peter's since the reign of Nero draws another slow, patient breath. Chapter 2, The Door with No Name. The smell arrives before the sight. It slips under the gate like a guilty secret. Warm iron filings mixed with the sweet, sour reek of afterbirth. Elena has smelled blood before, paper cuts and dusty folios, a nosebleed in the reading room at 24. But never the smell of a birth that never quite finished. The odor coats the back of her tongue and refuses to leave. She has come back alone, 41 hours after the handprint. No escort, no prior permission. She told the Swiss guard on the night desk that Cardinal Lamberti had summoned her urgently. The guard, barely 20, believed her because she is beautiful and speaks Latin like a native. Beauty and Latin open more doors in the Vatican than any key. The basalt wall from 2 nights ago is gone. In its place stands a slab of blackened steel, 2 meters wide, 3 meters tall, set flush into the rock as though the corridor grew around it. No hinges are visible. No handle, no seam, only a shallow, circular depression in the center, roughly the width of a dinner plate, where generations of polishing have worn the metal to a dull mirror. Elena raises her LED work lamp. The reflection that stares back is not hers. For one heartbeat, the polished circle shows a woman in a white alb, hood pulled low, face lost in shadow. The next heartbeat, it is Elena again, older, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. She blinks. The reflection blinks a fraction slower. She steps closer. The smell thickens until her eyes water. Beneath the placental sweetness is something else, the sharp, mineral bite of amniotic fluid left too long in the sun. She has never been pregnant, yet her body knows the scent the way a deer knows the smell of a wolf. Her lamp finds the symbol. It is almost erased, sanded down to faint grooves, but the shape is unmistakable once seen. A human fetus, head down, arms outstretched, legs folded, impaled upside down on a cross that is also a key. The crossbeam is formed by two tiny outstretched arms. The vertical is the umbilical cord, knotted at the throat. Someone spent decades trying to obliterate it. They failed. Elena's pulse is loud in her ears. She reaches out, not with curiosity now, but with the helpless compulsion of a tongue probing a rotting tooth, and lays her bare palm against the depression. The steel is warm, not fever warm, womb warm. Every light in the sub-basement dies at once. Not a flicker, not a brownout, absolute darkness, sudden as a guillotine. The temperature climbs 5 degrees in a single heartbeat. The air turns thick, syrupy, impossible to inhale without tasting copper. And then the sob. It comes from directly behind her left ear, close enough that she feels the moisture of it on her skin. A newborn's first cry, but wrong, too wet, too knowing, as though the child has already seen what waits outside the womb and regrets being born. Elena spins. Nothing, only the black, and the smell, and the warmth that now radiates from the steel like a body pressed against her back. She slams the emergency button on her lamp 3 times. Nothing happens. She is blind, deafened by her own heartbeat, drowning in the smell of birth gone bad. 10 seconds, 15, then a new sound, the soft, deliberate click of a tongue against teeth, the way a mother soothes an infant at the breast. It is coming from the metal. Elena backs away until her shoulders hit the opposite wall. Her lamp finally sputters back to life on its own. The circle is empty again. No reflection at all now, just a void blacker than the steel itself. But etched into the polished depression, fresh as though carved that instant, is a single drop of fluid. It hangs suspended, refusing to fall, trembling with surface tension. Under the lamp, it is the color of old pearls. Elena leans in despite herself. The drop detaches. It lands on the toe of her shoe with a sound like a kiss. Where it touches, the leather darkens, spreads, soaks through to her sock in the perfect outline of a tiny, perfect foot. She looks up. For the first time, she notices the faint inscription running around the rim of the circle, worn almost invisible, non est hic olives nisi, infans in corpse, et mater cuvis, non ploravit. There is no other here save the child on the cross and the mother who never wept. Elena's mouth goes dry. She has read every restricted catalog in the archive. That Latin phrase appears nowhere, not in any missal, not in any exorcism rite, not even in the banned grimoires. She reaches for her phone to photograph it. The screen is cracked in a perfect circle, as though something pressed a thumb through the glass from the inside. The camera app opens by itself. It is in selfie mode, on the screen. Behind her own pale face stands the hooded woman from the reflection. She is smiling. The hood falls back. There is no face beneath, only a smooth expanse of skin, wet and shining. as though freshly peeled from the womb. The phone dies. In the final flicker of the screen, Elena sees the woman raise one finger to where lips should be. Shh. Then darkness again, absolute and listening. Somewhere in the black, something is still breathing her air. Chapter 3. The Cardinal's Last Confession. The rain over Rome that afternoon was not rain. It was the city weeping in advance. Elena climbs the private staircase to the Cardinal's apartment above the Cortile del Belvedere at 4:30. Soaked from crossing the open courtyard without an umbrella, she has not slept. The tiny footprint on her shoe has not dried. It has darkened into a bruise that now climbs halfway up her ankle like spilled ink. A single Swiss guard lets her in without a word. He does not look at her face. He looks at her foot, inside. The apartment smells of beeswax, morphine, and the peculiar sweetness of a body preparing to leave itself. Heavy brocade curtains are drawn against the storm. The only light comes from 7 vigil candles arranged in a perfect circle on a walnut table. No crucifix, no Bible, only the candles and a small silver dish holding a single communion host that has begun to blacken at the edges. Cardinal Gregorio Lamberti is propped upright in a high-backed Renaissance chair that once belonged to Pius Nogan. He is 81 kilograms reduced to 49, skin the color of old parchment, eyes the pale blue of glacier melt. An oxygen cannula snakes into his nose, but the tank is turned off. He has dismissed the nurse hours ago. He does not greet her. He simply lifts one skeletal hand and points to the only other chair in the room, positioned exactly 3 meters away, the distance prescribed for contagious leprosy in medieval statutes. Sit, Daughteretta, he rasps. His voice is wind through dry leaves. I have waited 61 years to be unburdened. You are the first person in 6 decades who has come back from downstairs still able to speak. Elena sits. The footprint on her ankle throbs in rhythm with her pulse. Gregorio studies her for a long moment, then reaches under the folds of his scarlet mozzetta and withdraws a small tin box the size of a cigarette case. Inside lies a single Polaroid photograph, edges curled, colors bleached by time. He places it face up on the table between them. The picture shows a much younger Gregorio, 35 perhaps, still handsome in that austere Roman way, standing in the sub-basement corridor. Behind him is the black steel door. The depression in the center is visibly distended outward, as though something the size of a man has pressed against it from the inside. The bulge is smooth, rounded, unmistakably the curve of a pregnant belly. I took this on the feast of St. John Bosco, 1963, he whispers. 3 weeks after the election of Paul VI, I was sent down to catalog a crate of Coptic fragments that had arrived from Addis Ababa. I found the door already there. It had not been there the year before. No construction records, no papal bull. It simply arrived. He coughs. The sound is wet. Wrong. I stood exactly where you stood. I touched the metal, and then it breathed. He leans forward. The oxygen tube slips from his nose. Not metaphor. Elena, literal respiration. The steel rose and fell, 4 centimeters in, 4 centimeters out, like a lung made of iron. I timed it. 1 breath every 33 seconds. I counted 17 before I ran. His eyes fill with water that is not tears. too dark, too thick. I reported it to the Secretary of State. He laughed. He said I had been reading too many Ethiopian apocrypha. Then he promoted me to keep me quiet. Every pope since has known. Every pope has refused to open it. They weld another plate over it every Jubilee year. 7 plates now. 7 layers of denial. Elena finds her voice. What is behind it? Gregorio smiles. It is not a kind expression. In 1963, I asked the same question. They sent me back down with a stethoscope and a reel-to-reel recorder. I pressed the diaphragm to the lowest plate. Do you know what I heard? He does not wait. A heartbeat. Fast. 160 beats per minute. The heart rate of an unborn child in distress. The candles gutter all at once, though there is no draft. Gregorio's breathing turns ragged. He claws at his collar, pulls out a small silver reliquary on a chain. Inside is not a saint's bone. It is a single black fingernail clipping, curled like a fetus. I cut this off the hand that reached through in 1983, he says. Valerio managed to open it 9 centimeters before they dragged him back. The nail kept growing. It is still growing. Look. He opens the reliquary. The nail has lengthened. It is now 2 centimeters longer than the glass compartment, curling against the lid like a black vine. Elena feels the footprint on her leg crawl another inch higher. Gregorio suddenly convulses. His back arches. Black bile, thick as crude oil, erupts from his mouth, splattering the blackened host. The candles flare blue. For 2 full seconds his face changes. The wrinkles vanish. The skull shrinks. The eyes widen into the terrified stare of an 8-year-old boy in a cardinal's robe, 2 sizes too large. The boy's mouth opens in a silent scream that shows milk teeth and terror. Then the illusion snaps. Gregorio collapses forward, dead eyes staring at the ruined host. The boy's voice, high, piping, coming from nowhere and everywhere, speaks 1 sentence in perfect Italian. Tell her the door is a womb, and it is almost time. The candles extinguish themselves in perfect unison, in the sudden dark. Elena hears the unmistakable sound of an umbilical cord being cut, somewhere far below. The steel inhales again. Chapter 4. The Key That Was Never Made. The funeral of Cardinal Gregorio Lamberti takes place at dawn. Before the city wakes, no public announcement, no black-bordered notice in L'Osservatore Romano. Only 12 mourners in the crypt of Santa Pollinare, 6 Swiss guards, 4 archivists who never speak, Elena, and a priest who recites the responses in a voice flat with terror. The coffin is sealed. The body inside has already been wrapped in 3 layers of lead-lined silk, standard procedure for anyone who has seen too much, Elena is told when the lid is closed. The undertaker hammers 7 nails in the shape of a cross, 7, always 7, afterward, in the empty sacristy. Father Silas finds her. He is 29, pale as printer paper, eyes the color of wet ash. He has not slept since the cardinal died. His cassock hangs on him like a shroud 2 sizes too large. He left you something, Silas whispers. He presses a small velvet pouch into her hand. Inside is a folded sheet of vellum and a brass key to a drawer in the late cardinal's private study. The note is in Gregorio's spidery Latin, written hours before death. Go to the Barberini Chapel reliquary, 3rd shelf from the bottom. Behind the false panel marked with the B, take what is not bone and is not metal. Do not let them see you. Forgive me. The bee is the emblem of the Barberini family, 3 golden bees on azure. Pope Urban VIII, Maffeo Barberini, 1623 to 1644. His nephew, Antonio Barberini, cardinal nephew, dead at 39 in 1671, or so the official biography claims. Elena knows the chapel. It is closed for restoration. Scaffolding everywhere. Dust sheets over the Bernini sculptures. She goes at 2 in the afternoon, when the workmen are at lunch and the tourists are herded toward the Sistine. The reliquary wall is a riot of gilded niches, crystal urns, and tiny labels in antique script. Third shelf from the bottom, a plain ebony box the size of a cigar humidor, locked with a mechanism that looks medieval. The brass key fits perfectly. Inside, wrapped in rotting purple silk, lies a human clavicle, right side, adult male, polished to ivory smoothness. One end has been carved into an intricate, asymmetrical key, 7 wards, 7 notches, 7 tiny barbs shaped like fetal fingers. A second note. In the same hand, Antonio Barberini did not die of fever in 1671. He died in 1643 in this very chapel, on the Feast of the Innocents. He removed the bone himself with a silver scalpel, while Urban VIII held the chalice to catch the blood. They needed a key that had never been touched by unconsecrated hands, a key that remembered pain, a key that was still alive. Elena's fingers close around the bone. It is warm, not body warm, alive warm. She feels the marrow inside shift, as though tiny teeth are testing the walls of their prison. She slips the bone into the inside pocket of her coat, right against her heart, as she turns to leave. Her left ring finger makes a sound, crack, not from her hand. From across the chapel 10 meters away, near the scaffolding, a sharp, wet pop, like knuckle cartilage splitting. She looks. Nothing moves. But her finger now hangs at an unnatural angle, the joint swollen purple, the skin split in a perfect straight line. The bone key pulses once against her ribs, in time with her heartbeat. She does not scream. She walks out of the chapel, past the workmen returning from lunch, past the tourists who will never know what just walked among them. In the piazza outside, the autumn sun is suddenly too bright. She flexes her broken finger. It obeys, but the pain is not in her hand. It is in the bone pressed against her sternum. Remembering what it felt like to be cut from a living man 381 years ago. Chapter 5, Whispers in Ge'ez, revised, full 4,312 words. Elena has not slept for 39 hours. She sits on the floor of her room in the Domus Sanctae Marthae, back pressed to the locked door, knees drawn to her chest. The bone key lies on the tiles 3 meters away, wrapped in a linen corporal stolen from the sacristy. The holy water in the glass beside it has turned the color of dried liver and is slowly evaporating upward, forming a perfect inverted teardrop on the ceiling that refuses to fall. At Source 3:17 exactly, the room changes temperature by 7 degrees in the space of a heartbeat. The air becomes thick, humid, tasting of copper and frankincense left too long in a sealed tomb. The overhead light, already dimmed to its lowest setting, flickers once, twice, then steadies into a bruised violet glow, the color of a fresh strangulation mark. The first whisper arrives not through the grill this time, but from inside the bone key itself. It is barely audible, like a fingernail scratching the inside of a coffin lid. Then it swells. J.S. Ancient. Perfect. Spoken with the throat of a man who died before the Council of Chalcedon. Elena knows the text the instant it begins. She has memorized Revelation in 4 languages. She recognizes the cadence, the way a mother recognizes her child's cry in a crowded room. But this is Revelation, read backwards, word for word, from the final Amen of chapter 22 all the way to the first grace of chapter 1. The Lamb that was slain is unslain. The seals are closed again. The 4 horsemen ride home. The woman clothed with the sun is dragged backward into the dragon's jaws. Every victory is reversed. Every promise is revoked. The entire apocalypse is unhappening, verse by merciless verse. The voice is not angry. It is heartbroken, and it is getting louder. The linen around the bone key begins to darken, as though the fabric is absorbing ink from the inside. The stain spreads in the shape of an upside-down cross that drips upward, defying gravity, until the entire corporal is soaked black. Galena's phone, on the desk, screen locked, face down, lights up by itself. The voice memo app opens. A red waveform begins to dance. She watches, paralyzed. As the seconds count, subrule 7, nodule 12, roll 21, to 33 the waveform splits. 2 voices now. One is the ancient male deacon, continuing the reversed revelation. The other is hers, her own voice, calm, measured, fluent in a language she has never studied, reciting the exact same text in perfect synchrony. She hears herself say, Wayabale Wayamatse, Wayaterakabe Wanagile, and the scroll is swallowed again, and the angel comes no more, and the word is unmade. The recording reaches Zerfsesel 47. It stops. The room falls silent. The violet light dies, plunging everything into absolute darkness. Then the phone speaker crackles, and her own voice, recorded 47 seconds ago, begins to play back at full volume. But this time, the words are different. This time, they are addressed to her. Elena, you opened the womb with the wrong key. The child remembers your heartbeat from before you were born. It is coming backward through you. Count the breaths you have left. There are 33. The playback ends. The screen cracks in a perfect circle, as though a thumb has been pressed through the glass from the inside. From the cracked speaker comes a wet, sucking sound, placenta separating from uterine wall. The bone key unwraps itself. It rises from the soaked corporal, hovering 3 centimeters above the floor, spinning slowly on its long axis like a compass needle seeking true north. It points directly at Elena's sternum. The whispers resume, no longer from the key, no longer from the phone. They are coming from inside her mouth. Her lips are closed. Her teeth are clenched. Yet the reversed revelation pours out of her in flawless ge'ez, each syllable tasting of iron and milk. She feels her tongue moving against her will, forming consonants that scrape the roof of her mouth raw. Blood fills her mouth, her own, warm, metallic. She tries to scream. The scream comes out as the next verse, perfectly pronounced. The bone key darts forward, fast as a striking viper, and embeds itself tip first into the soft flesh just below her clavicle. Not deep, only half a centimeter. Enough. The pain is white hot, intimate, maternal. Her vision tunnels. In the blackness, she sees a single image, vivid as a flash photograph. A vast underground chamber lit by 7 dying candles. in the center, a steel door swollen outward like a pregnant belly. On the floor in front of it, a woman in a white alb lies on her back, legs spread, giving birth to something that is climbing backward into her body. The woman's face is Elena's own, older, eyes rolled white, mouth open in the exact shape of the JS letters now pouring from her throat. The vision snaps. She is back in the room. The bone key is gone from her chest. There is no wound, only a perfect, circular bruise the color of ripe figs, exactly where the key struck. Inside the bruise, something moves, once, like a hiccup or a kick. Chapter 6. The room that wasn't on any map. Elena has not left the archives in 53 hours. She moves through the stacks like a ghost who has forgotten she is still alive. Eyes bloodshot, skin the color of old parchment. The bruise below her clavicle, now a perfect circle of black violet that pulses with every heartbeat. The bone key is wrapped in silk and hidden inside her bra, pressed directly against the sternum, warm as a second heart. She tells herself it is for safekeeping. The truth is, she cannot bear to be separated from it now. When she tried to leave it in her room, her ribs began to ache with a hollow, maternal longing. She is in the restricted cartography vault, a narrow room on level 3 lined with mahogany drawers that smell of cedar and camphor. The air here is so dry it sucks moisture from the eyes. Every footfalls are swallowed by centuries of dust. No one else comes here anymore. The digital scans were completed in 2019, and the physical plans are considered obsolete. But Elena knows better. Obsolete things are where the Vatican hides its sharpest secrets. She has spent the night cross-referencing every architectural survey of St. Peter's from Bramante to Maderno, searching for discrepancies. At 4:47 a.m., she finds it, a single folio, bound in cracked red morocco, labeled in faded ink, Pianta del Necropoli Vaticana, Revisione 1538 to Swim Stinctuary 6. The date is wrong. Michelangelo took over the Basilica project in 1546. The handwriting, however, is unmistakable. The bold slanted capitals, the tiny sketched faces in the margins, Pooty with eyes scratched out. She spreads the plan across the mahogany table under a green banker's lamp. The drawing is exquisite. Every column, every crypt, every drainage channel rendered with obsessive precision. But behind the black steel door, marked only as a solid block with no dimensions, there is a chamber, a perfect octagon, 13 meters across, with 8 radial walls and a domed ceiling supported by 8 ribs that meet in a boss carved with a single, staring eye. The chamber has no entrance drawn, only one word, in Michelangelo's own hand, scrawled across the octagon in angry red chalk, imprigionare to imprison. Below it, smaller, almost illegible, l'ottavo senza nome, the 8th without name. Elena's breath catches. She has read every biography, every letter, every contract. Michelangelo never mentioned an 8th angel. The tradition speaks of 7 archangels: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Sealtiel, Jegudiel, Barachiel. Some apocryphal texts add an 8th, the angel of tears, or of secrets, or of the deep waters, but never named, never spoken. She traces the octagon with her finger. The paper is warm. She pulls her hand away as if burned. The red chalk word has bled fresh, wet, into the vellum. The letters glisten, like they were written seconds ago. Elena's heart hammers so hard the bone key vibrates against her skin. She needs to see. She needs proof that the room exists outside of one mad artist's nightmare. She gathers tools, a surveyor's laser pointer, red beam, high intensity, a thermal camera borrowed from the restoration lab, a spool of surveyor's twine, and the bone key. Now wrapped in black silk because the linen turned to ash in her pocket overnight. Father Silas finds her at the elevator. He looks worse than she does. His eyes are sunken, pupils dilated, the whites threaded with red. He has not shaved. Dark stubble makes him look like a corpse that forgot to lie down. "You're going back," he says. It is not a question. I have to know how big the lie is. He blocks the gate with his body. Gregorio made me swear if anyone tried to measure the door, I was to stop them, by force if necessary. Elena meets his gaze. "Your oath died with him." Silas flinches as if slapped. He steps aside, but he follows. They descend together in silence. The elevator stops at 4. They take the spiral stairs the rest of the way, footsteps echoing like gunshots in the narrow shaft. At 6, the air turns cold enough to see breath. At 7, the temperature rises again, thick and humid, the way it feels inside a mouth. The black steel door waits exactly where it always was, but it is different now. The depression in the center has swollen another 3 centimeters outward since yesterday. The metal is glossy with condensation, or something thicker. Tiny droplets bead on the surface and run upward, against gravity, collecting at the top edge and dripping in slow, deliberate tears. Silas makes the sign of the cross backward. Elena ignores him. She kneels, unspools the twine, ties one end to the gate hinge. She switches on the laser pointer. The red beam slices through the dark like a scalpel. She aims it at the wall beside the door, where the stone should be solid basalt. The beam hits something and refracts. Not reflects, refracts. The red line bends at an impossible angle, curving around an invisible corner that is not there. Elena's stomach drops. She moves the pointer slowly. The beam traces the outline of the octagon from Michelangelo's plan, perfectly, as though the walls are glass and the room is already open. Silas whispers, "Mary, Mother of God." Elena steps forward. The laser beam passes through the steel door as if it were fog. On the other side, the red dot dances across a vaulted ceiling she cannot see, illuminating ribs of stone that curve upward into darkness. She adjusts the angle. The beam finds the boss, the central eye. It blinks, slowly, deliberately, a wet, vertical lid sliding over a pupil the color of old blood. Silas vomits on the floor. Elena does not flinch. She aims the laser at the floor. Her shadow stretches across the basalt, long and thin in the red light. Then the shadow moves on its own. The shoulders broaden from the back. 2 vast wings unfurl, broken, jagged. Feathers torn and bleeding shadow ichor that drips upward into the ceiling. The wings spread until they fill the corridor, tips scraping sparks from the stone. The shadow head turns. It has no face, only a mouth, too wide, lined with infant teeth. It smiles at her. The laser pointer grows hot in her hand, scalding. She drops it. The beam spins wildly across the walls, strobing red, revealing glimpses, chains hanging from the ceiling, thick as a man's thigh. ending in rusted manacles, a stone birthing stool crusted with old blood, 8 alcoves in the walls, each containing a desiccated form wrapped in black linen, heads bowed, wings folded tight. The shadow lunges, not toward Elena, toward her real body. She feels it hit her like a physical blow. The bone key burns white hot against her chest. She staggers back. The shadow wings wrap around her, cold as grave dirt, smelling of placenta and frankincense. Silas is screaming in Latin, backing away, crossing himself frantically. Elena rips open her shirt. The bruise below her clavicle has split. From the circle, a single black feather pushes through the skin, wet, new, quivering. It grows 10 centimeters, 20, 30, curving backward over her shoulder like a question mark made of night. The pain is beyond screaming. It is the pain of something being born the wrong way. Elena collapses to her knees. The shadow releases her. The feather retracts, sliding back into her flesh with a sound of a sword being sheathed. The laser pointer rolls to a stop. The red beam points directly at the center of the door. The depression pulses once, out, in, out, like a mouth trying to speak. Silas is crying now, snot and tears mixing on his chin. It's awake, he sobs. It knows we know. Elena stands. Her voice is steady, but it is not entirely her own. Michelangelo didn't design a prison, she says, the words taste of jazz on her tongue. He designed a womb. Behind the steel, something laughs with the voice of 8 choirs singing in reverse. Chapter 7, The Boy Who Drew Blood. The laboratory lights hum with a low, insectile drone that burrows into the skull like a migraine made of sound, and the air hangs heavy with the sharp tang of formaldehyde mingled with something sweeter, more intimate, the cloying rot of preserved flesh that has never quite accepted death. Elena stands motionless before the stainless steel table, the vial in her palm growing warmer by the second, as though the blood inside remembers the heat of a living womb and refuses to cool. The black violet bruise on her back throbs in slow, deliberate waves, each pulse sending a ripple of itch across her shoulder blades where the shadow wing had briefly taken root. The skin there now tender and raised, as if feathers are pushing through from the inside, testing the thin barrier of her humanity. Father Silas hovers in the doorway, his breathing shallow and ragged, the scent of his fear, sour sweat and unwashed cassock cutting through the chemical haze like a blade. He had carried the box here himself, his arms trembling under its insignificant weight, as though it contained not paper and film, but the concentrated gravity of every scream that had ever echoed in the sub-basements below. The red tape sealing it had cracked the moment his fingers touched it, flaking away like dried scab, revealing Gregorio's handwriting beneath, spidery, urgent. The letters slanted as if written in haste, while something watched over his shoulder. Silas set it down with the reverence of a man placing a live grenade on an altar, his lips moving in silent Latin that tasted of ash on his tongue, and then he backed away until the doorframe pressed into his spine, unwilling to turn his back on what the box might release. Elena slices the tape with a scalpel that feels colder than the air around it, the blade whispering through the cardboard with a soft, intimate rip that echoes too loudly in the sterile room. Inside, the objects nestle in shredded archival paper that smells of mildew and old incense, the kind burned in secret rites no one admits still happen. First, the Polaroid, its edges curled like burned petals, the colors faded to ghosts of themselves under the merciless laboratory lights. The boy in the white cassock kneels in the corridor she knows too well now, the black steel door looming behind him like a monolith that has learned to wait. His hair is the pale gold of communion wafers, his face serene, almost luminous with a joy that has no place in a child's eyes. The brush in his hand is thick with fluid that gleams wetly even in the photograph, and the symbol on the floor spreads beneath him like a dark flower blooming in reverse, petals of blood unfurling from the center outward. She turns the photo over with fingers that have begun to tremble despite her will, and the childish block letters scrawled on the back hit her like ice water poured directly into her veins, for the mother who never wept, from her son who remembered. The words burrow into her mind, repeating in a loop the tastes of copper and salt, and she feels the bruise on her back answer with a sharp, answering twitch, as though whatever grows there recognizes kinship. Silas's voice comes out strangled, barely above the hum of the lights. Matteo Rossi, he says, the name tasting foul in his mouth. 12 years old, Feast of the Immaculate Conception, 1978. He served the 7 o'clock Mass in the Borgo parish, then vanished between the Agnus Dei and Communion. They found him 3 hours later, exactly 33 meters below the high altar, barefoot, cassock soaked to the waist. He had drawn the symbol 33 times, each one larger, each one perfect. The blood never dried. Security tried to wash it away with holy water and bleach. It only spread. Elena's throat works, but no sound emerges. She lifts the vial instead, the glass cool at first, then warming rapidly against her skin until it feels like holding a living heart between her fingers. The wax seal is black, cracked, imprinted with a tiny B, the Barberini mark again, though no one in 1978 should have known to use it. She breaks the seal with her thumbnail, and the smell explodes outward, rich, dark, menstrual blood preserved at the peak of its potency. The scent of a womb that lost its child and kept the grief liquid for decades. It fills the room like smoke, thick enough to taste, coating her tongue with the iron-sweet flavor of profoundest sorrow. The substance inside the vial is not clotted, 47 years, and it moves like fresh flow, swirling lazily as she tilts the glass, forming tiny whirlpools that look almost like faces pressing against the inside curve. One drop clings to the rim, trembling, refusing to fall, until gravity finally wins and it detaches with a soft, wet plop onto the steel table. Where it lands, the metal hisses, not with heat, but with recognition, and the drop begins to crawl, leaving a glistening trail that etches the symbol into the stainless steel with acidic precision. The lines smoke gently, filling the air with the burnt hair stench of sacred things profaned. Silas is on his knees now, rosary beads clicking between fingers that have gone bloodless white. His mother, he chokes out, had miscarried the year before, 7 months, a girl. They told the family the remains were buried in consecrated ground, but the placenta was kept in the pathology vault beneath the Gemelli Hospital. Matteo broke in at night. He told the exorcist later, before they silenced him, that the baby had spoken to him in dreams, that she needed her face back, that the door was hungry for a mother who would finally weep. Elena's vision tunnels. The crawling drop has finished its work. The symbol gleams wetly on the table, perfect, pulsing faintly as though breathing. In the center, new letters form, rising from the blood like bruises under skin. Soon, Mummy. She staggers back, the vial slipping from her fingers to shatter on the floor in a spray of crimson that spatters her shoes like fresh abortion. The blood on the tiles begins to move of its own accord, flowing together into tiny rivers that seek the cracks between the tiles, disappearing downward as though the building itself is drinking. Silas is sobbing openly now, the sound wet and animal. He claws at his collar, tearing the Roman collar free as though it burns. They found him sitting in the center of the largest symbol. He gasps between sobs, smiling. His mouth was full. They thought he had bitten his tongue. But when they pried his jaws open, it wasn't his blood. It was hers, the placenta. He had drunk it all, and when they asked him why, he said, the projector whirs to life by itself, the ancient bell and howl, unplugged for decades, coughs dust and begins to turn. The screen flickers with grainy black and white life. 08 Die C, 1978, 21-44, the corridor. The boy enters frame carrying the silver chalice that sloshes with every step, dark fluid lapping at the rim like a living thing. He kneels. He dips the brush. He draws. The symbol blooms under his hands, perfect, enormous. The blood flowing upward from the floor to meet the brush strokes halfway, as though the stone itself is eager. He works in silence, face serene, eyes reflecting a light that is not in the corridor. When the final line is complete, he sits back on his heels. He looks directly into the camera. His smile widens, gentle, loving, the smile of a child who has finally come home. Then his mouth opens, not in speech, in release. Blood pours forth in a thick, perfect column, darker than wine, thicker than oil, cascading down his chin and chest in a black-red waterfall that defies gravity by never quite touching the floor. It hangs in the air for a moment, suspended, forming the shape of a tiny, curled fetus before splashing into the center of the symbol. The boy never blinks. His teeth are stained crimson, perfect little milk teeth gleaming wetly. He leans forward, places both palms into the floating blood, and when he lifts them, they are clean, immaculate. He stands. He walks toward the camera, step, 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 until his face fills the frame entirely. Eyes milk white, pupils rolled back to reveal only sclera veined with red. His lips move, no sound on the tape. But Elena hears it anyway, inside her skull, in a voice that is both the boy's and something ancient beneath him. Thank you, Mummy. She's almost ready. The film burns. The projector lamp explodes in a shower of sparks that smell of burning flesh. In the darkness that follows, something small and wet begins to lap at Elena's ankles, the blood from the shattered vial. Warm now, tasting her skin like a tongue. Chapter 8. The Night the Cameras Died. The Vatican security control room sits 3 levels above the public crypts. A windowless bunker lined with racks of humming servers that smell of ozone and overheated plastic. The air so cold and dry, it sucks the moisture from your eyes and leaves the taste of copper on the tongue. at 02:51 a.m. on the feast of Saint Cecilia, patroness of music and, ironically, of those who must listen to things that they should never hear. The room is manned by only one guard, Brother Luca, a young Neapolitan who has drawn the graveyard shift for the third week running because he once asked too many questions about the lower levels. He sits hunched over a bank of 30-year-old monitors, sipping coffee gone bitter hours ago, the blue glow painting his face the color of a corpse under black light. The screens show empty corridors, silent chapels, the slow sweep of Swiss guards on their endless circuits, nothing that should keep a man awake. Yet Brother Luca has not blinked properly in 20 minutes. Elena enters without knocking, the bone key now on a leather cord around her neck, hidden beneath her sweater, but pulsing against her skin like a second, angry heart. Father Silas trails behind her, his face the color of tallow, lips moving in the prayer to Saint Michael that no one has formally used since 1964, but which every priest below the rank of bishop still knows by heart. They have come straight from the restoration lab, where the blood on the floor has arranged itself into a perfect map of the octagonal chamber Michelangelo never admitted drawing. The lines still wet, still warm, still smelling of the boy who is not a boy. Brother Luca jumps at the sound of the door, coffee sloshing across the console. "You can't be here," he starts. But the words die when he sees Silas's eyes, pupils blown wide, reflecting the monitors like black mirrors. Elena does not waste time on permission. She leans over the keyboard, fingers flying across keys that have not been touched since the last papal conclave, pulling up the restricted feeds for level 7. The guard opens his mouth to protest again, but something in her face silences him, the same expression the Swiss guards wear when they stand outside the papal apartments and pretend they do not hear screaming. The main monitor blooms to life with 8 separate windows, each showing a different angle of the sub-basement corridor, the black steel door from the front, from above, from the sides, infrared, ultraviolet, standard definition, high definition, and one ancient analog feed that has been running continuously since 1978, the same camera that captured Matteo Rossi smiling through a mouthful of his mother's grief. Everything is quiet, too quiet. The temperature in the control room has been dropping steadily since they entered, the air growing thick with the scent of cold iron and candle smoke that should not exist in a room full of electronics. Frost begins to feather across the inside of the monitors, delicate white spirals that look almost like wings. At exactly 03:03 AA, every screen flickers at once, not static, reversal. The footage begins to run backward, guards walking in reverse, dust motes rising from the floor to rejoin the air, shadows retreating into corners, like animals returning to their burrows. The timestamp in the corner of each feed jumps forward instead of backward, accelerating wildly in 03, 03, 03, and 04, 03.07, then leaping days, weeks, until it settles on a date 3 weeks in the future, 11th of December 2025. And there, in perfect synchrony across all 8 feeds, hangs Father Silas. He is suspended from the ceiling by a rope made of rosary beads knotted together, the ivory crucifix buried deep in his throat, his body turning slowly like a mobile above a crib that was never meant to hold a living child. His face is purple-black, tongue protruding, eyes burst and milky. Yet they move. They track something just off camera with the slow, deliberate focus of a predator that has learned patience over centuries. His cassock is soaked dark from the waist down, as though he has been dipped in the same blood that once poured from a 12-year-old boy's smiling mouth. Brother Luca makes a sound like a kicked dog and backs into the wall, rosary clicking against his teeth. Elena cannot move because the hanging Silas is not alone. Kneeling beneath the body, head bowed, hands clasped in prayer, is Elena herself, 3 weeks older, hair longer, belly swollen with the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy, wearing the white alb of a deaconess that has never existed in the Latin rite. The future Elena raises her head. She is smiling the same serene smile Matteo wore in 1978. She places both hands on the gentle dome of her abdomen and presses hard. Something inside kicks back, visible beneath the fabric, a sharp, angular movement that is not human. The hanging Silas's mouth opens. A voice issues, not from his ruined throat, but from every speaker in the control room at once, layered with the choral depth of 8 throats speaking in perfect unison. The ancient rite of binding that was removed from the Roman ritual in 1614 because too many exorcists who used it were found hanged by their own stoles. Exorcizo te, creatura tenebrarum, per Deum vivum, per Deum sanctum, per Deum qui sic delexit mundum, ut filium suum unigenitum daret, ut omnes qui credit in eum non periat. Sed habeat vitam aeternam, sed tu, octavo angelus, non credidisti. I exorcise thee, creature of darkness, by the living God, by the holy God, by the God who so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But thou, 8th angel, didst not believe. The screens go black, all 8 of them. Absolute darkness swallows the room, the kind of darkness that has weight, that presses against the eardrums and tastes of grave dirt. 10 seconds of silence so complete, Elena can hear her own blood moving. Then the emergency backup lights kick in, blood red, the color used during Good Friday services when the tabernacle is empty. The main monitor flares back to life. Silas's dead face fills the entire screen, 3 centimeters from the lens, eyes milk white and weeping something thicker than tears. His ruined mouth moves. The voice that comes out is Elena's own, recorded from some moment yet to happen, gentle and loving and utterly maternal. Shh, my darling, Mummy's here. It's time to come out backwards. The screen shatters outward in a spray of glass and sparks that smell of burning flesh. In the raining shards, Elena sees reflected not the control room, but the octagonal chamber, Michelangelo's prison, its 8 walls now slick with birth fluid, the 8 linen-wrapped forms in the alcoves stirring like cocoons about to split. Brother Luca is on the floor, clawing at his eyes, screaming in Neapolitan dialect about children with too many wings. Father Silas, the real one, the living one, stands frozen in the doorway, piss running down his leg in a warm stream that steams in the cold and on every monitor, even the broken ones. The timestamp now reads 11 DC 2025 0333 exactly 3 weeks from tonight. Chapter 9, The Flesh That Remembers. Elena no longer recognizes the taste of her own skin. She has taken to licking the circle beneath her left clavicle when no one is watching, the way a wounded animal tongues a wound to measure how far the infection has spread. The bruise is no longer a bruise. It has become a seal, perfectly round, 3 centimeters across, the color of spoiled blackberries left in the sun. The skin there is raised, glossy, almost lacquered, and beneath it, something shifts with the slow deliberation of a creature turning in its sleep. She showers with the lights off now, because even the soft glow of the bathroom bulb makes the circle glisten like wet amniotic sac, and she cannot bear to watch it breathe. The Vatican has begun to feel smaller, as though the walls are drawing inward with each passing hour, exhaling centuries of incense and panic that settle on her tongue like ash. She moves through corridors that once seemed endless, past frescoes whose painted eyes now follow her with the weary sympathy of saints who have seen this story before. The Swiss guards nod when she passes, but their halberds tremble slightly, and she notices they no longer look directly at her chest. Father Silas has stopped speaking entirely. He trails her like a shadow that has forgotten how to lie flat, his rosary beads clicking against his teeth in a rhythm that matches the pulse in her brand exactly. She has taken to sleeping in the restoration laboratory, stretched across 2 steel tables pushed together, because the guest rooms feel too much like wombs, curved ceilings, soft lighting, the muffled hush of distant prayers that sound like lullabies sung to something that should have stayed unborn. Here, under the harsh ultraviolet lamps, everything is stripped to its truth, the dust motes that hang in the air like suspended afterbirth, the faint smell of formalin that never quite masks the sweeter undertone of rotting placenta, the way her own reflection in the polished tabletops looks younger every day, as though the thing inside her is feeding on her future and giving nothing back but smoothness. Tonight the laboratory is colder than usual. The thermostats read 4 degrees Celsius, but her breath does not fog. Instead, it hangs in the air like milk vapor, thick and reluctant to disperse. She sits on the edge of the table in nothing but an oversized archival smock, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and studies her left palm beneath the magnifying lamp. The lines that once told her fortune, lifeline, heartline, fate line have been overwritten by the symbol. It appeared 3 nights ago, burned into her flesh without heat or pain, as though the skin simply remembered what it was meant to become. At first, it was only the outline, thin and black, like a tattoo done with ash and regret. Then the lines thickened, darkened, began to rise from the surrounding skin in delicate ridges that caught the light like obsidian wire. Yesterday, the ridges sprouted the first hairs, fine, black, downy, the kind that covers a fetus in its 7th month, or when it is still deciding whether to be human. They grow downward from the circle's edge, curling across her lifeline in perfect spirals, each strand no longer than a millimeter, yet strong enough to resist when she tries to pluck them. They do not hurt. They itch with the intimate, unbearable itch of something knitting itself together beneath the surface. She has tried everything rational, surgical spirit, silver nitrate, even the bone key itself, pressed against the brand like a crucifix against a demon. The key grew warm, almost affectionate, and the hairs grew faster. Now there are hundreds, thousands, a soft black pelt that spreads beyond the original circle, creeping toward her wrist in delicate waves that look almost like feathers if you do not look too closely. When she flexes her fingers, the hairs part and reveal the skin beneath, glossy, taut, the color of a fresh placenta, veined faintly with blue. Elena stands and walks to the mirror that hangs above the sink, the one used for examining illuminated manuscripts under raking light. She has avoided it for days. The glass is old, wavering slightly, the silver backing mottled with age spots that look like bruises. She lifts her hand, palm outward, and places it against the cold surface. The reflection does not match. In the mirror, the brand is no longer a brand, so it is a window. Through the circle of her palm she sees, not the laboratory wall, not the pipes and cables behind it, but a darkness that has depth and movement, a liquid black that swirls with slow, deliberate currents. And in the center of that darkness floats the fetus. It is perfect, 7 months, perhaps 8, head down, knees drawn to chest, arms crossed over the place where a heart should beat. The skin is translucent, veined with gold, the color of old parchment soaked in holy oil. The umbilical cord loops around its throat 3 times, knotted neatly. Yet it does not strangle. The cord pulses gently, feeding something back into the darkness, instead of forward into life. Elena's real hand begins to sweat against the glass. The fetus turns its head, slowly, deliberately. The eyes open. They are her eyes, but older, much older. They look straight at her, through the mirror, through the glass, through the thin barrier of her palm, and blink once, with the slow, deliberate movement of something that has waited centuries for this exact moment. The lips part. No sound emerges, but Elena hears the words inside her skull with the clarity of a bell rung directly against bone. Mummy, I've been waiting inside you all along. Her reflection smiles. The fetus smiles with her. The hairs on her palm stand erect, brushing the mirror like tiny blind fingers seeking a nipple. The glass begins to sweat from the inside. Droplets form on the surface that's not a surface, running upward in perfect defiance of gravity, collecting at the top of the circle and dripping into the darkness beyond. Elena tries to pull her hand away. She cannot. The skin of her palm has fused with the mirror, not glued, grown together, as though the glass has become living tissue and her flesh has become glass. She feels the fetus move. A tiny hand presses against the inside of her palm from the other side, fingers displayed, matching hers exactly. It pushes, her skin stretches, thins, begins to tear. The first a drop of blood appears, not red, but black, thick as tar, smelling of myrrh and afterbirth. It beads. It falls upward, into the mouth of the waiting child. Chapter 10. The Pope Who Knelt and Wept. Elena has stopped counting the days. Time beneath the Vatican no longer moves forward. It folds, like a letter creased too many times until the paper tears along the seams. She wakes on the laboratory floor with no memory of lying down, cheek pressed to cold steel that tastes of salt and old blood. The black fetal hair on her palm now long enough to brush her wrist when she flexes her fingers. The itch has become a throb, a second heartbeat that answers the bone key hanging between her breasts with perfect, mocking synchrony. Father Silas sits in the corner, knees drawn to chest, rocking in tiny, mechanical increments, his lips cracked and bleeding from hours of whispered Latin that no longer forms coherent words, only fragments, like a record skipping on the same groove of terror. She has not seen daylight in what feels like weeks, though the calendar on the broken monitor insists only 9 days have passed since the cameras showed her pregnant with something that should not exist. The bruise on her chest has spread downward in delicate black veins that disappear beneath the waistband of her jeans, and she refuses to look at what might be growing there. Instead, she works, frantic, obsessive, cross-referencing every sealed file marked with the octagonal symbol, every redacted page, every diary entry that ends mid-sentence, as though the writer suddenly understood silence was safer than truth. It is in the deepest drawer of Gregorio's former desk, behind a false panel lined with lead, that she finds the plain manila folder labeled only with a date, 2 April 2005, the day John Paul II died. Inside is a single sheet of heavy papal stationery, the letterhead simple, almost austere, no coat of arms, no triple tiara, just the words Servus Servorum Dei in small capitals. The handwriting is unmistakably Karl Wojtyła's, the bold downstrokes, the slight tremor that worsened in his final months. Elena's Latin is flawless, but the words still hit her like physical blows. Si ostium unquam aperitur, priusquam id extra senatis, totam civitatem Vaticanum delere jubete, non est edemum. Est angelus octavus, a recordatur, if the door is ever opened before you allow it out, order the total destruction of Vatican City. It is not a demon. It is the eighth angel, and it remembers. Beneath the signature is a second line, added in shaking pencil, the graphite smudged as though a tear had fallen. I knelt before it. It sang to me with the voice of every child I failed to save. Forgive me, brothers, I was not strong enough. Elena's knees buckle. She sits hard on the floor, the folder clutched to her chest like a child she is terrified to acknowledge. The bone key burns against her skin, hot enough to brand, and for the first time she feels genuine, bone-deep fear, not the intellectual dread of a scholar uncovering forbidden history, but the animal terror of a woman who realizes she is carrying something that popes have ordered nuclear-level destruction to contain. Silas crawls across the floor to her, his eyes wild, pupils pinpricks and jaundiced whites. He knew, he whispers, voice raw from screaming prayers no one answered. The pole. He went down alone, April 2nd, 2:30 in the morning. No guards, no secretaries, just him and his cane and the oxygen tank he refused to use. They found him 6 hours later on his knees in front of the door, tears frozen on his cheeks. He never spoke of it, not once, but that night he wrote this. Elena's hands shake so badly she can barely hold the page. The fear is no longer abstract. It is intimate, maternal, a cold hand sliding between her ribs to cradle whatever is growing where her heart should be. She thinks of John Paul II, the man who survived an assassination attempt, who kissed the ground of every country he visited, who forgave his would-be killer, and imagines him reduced to this, a trembling old man on his knees before something that made him contemplate annihilating the holiest city on earth rather than let it escape. She understands now why he wept. Silas produces a small USB drive from his pocket. The plastic cracked, labeled only with a faded Sharpie cross. From the Swiss Guard archive, he says, voice breaking. They were ordered to destroy it. One of them couldn't. His fingers hover over the laboratory's ancient laptop, hesitating as though touching the key might damn them both. You need to see what he saw. The file is encrypted with a simple papal cipher, 3 letters, KJP, Karol Josef Wojtyła. Silas enters the password with the reverence of a man opening a tomb. The video begins. Grainy night vision. Timestamped 02 APR 2005 02 31 14. The corridor is empty. The door smaller than, only 3 layers of steel. The depression barely swollen. John Paul II enters frame alone, moving with the painful slowness of a man whose body has betrayed him long ago. He wears a simple white cassock, no pectoral cross, no zucchetto. His cane taps once, twice, then falls from nerveless fingers as he reaches the door and sinks to his knees with a sound that might be a sob or a prayer. He places both palms against the metal. The depression begins to swell outward, slowly, lovingly, like a cheek filling with breath before a kiss. The Pope's head falls forward, his shoulders shake. He is weeping. Great silent convulsions that rack his frail frame, tears falling in perfect droplets that strike the floor and do not splash. They hang, suspended, forming tiny crimson pearls that roll toward the door and are absorbed like offerings. Then the voice comes, not from the Pope, from the door. A child's voice, high and sweet and ancient, layered with the harmony of 1,000 aborted lullabies. It sings in Polish, the language of Wojtyła's childhood, a song Elena does not know but recognizes in her motto, Śpi, kochanie. Jeśli gwiazdka z nieba ci leci, leci do ciebie, leci do mamy. Sleep, my darling. If a little star falls from heaven for you, it flies to you. It flies to mommy. The Pope's head snaps up. His mouth opens in a scream that has no sound on the recording. But Elena hears it anyway, inside her own throat, as though the child is using her larynx as a telephone. The scream is not the Pope's voice. It is a child's, high, terrified, overjoyed. The depression in the door presses outward until the metal groans, stretching thin as skin, revealing beneath it the faint outline of a tiny face, cheeks, nose, the perfect bow of a mouth, pushing forward as though trying to kiss the weeping old man through 7 layers of steel. John Paul II's hands scrabble at the door, nails tearing, leaving bloody streaks that spell words in hurried Latin, non apere nunquam, never open. The child's scream rises, filling the corridor, filling the laboratory, filling Elena's skull until her vision whites out. The video ends abruptly. The laptop screen fractures in a perfect circle, spiderwebbing outward from the center, as though something inside the machine has just been born. In the darkness that follows, Elena feels it, the first real kick, low in her abdomen, directly beneath the bone key, a greeting or a promise. Chapter 11, The Exorcism That Failed, 1983. Elena has begun to dream in reverse. She falls asleep on the laboratory floor with her cheek against the cold steel and wakes inside memories that have not happened yet, corridors that stretch backward into darkness, footsteps that retreat instead of advance, her own voice calling her name from a mouth that is not hers. The black fetal hair on her palm has grown long enough to braid now, soft strands that curl around her fingers when she flexes them, tugging gently as though reminding her who truly holds the hand. The thing beneath her ribs has begun to sing, wordless, tuneless, a vibration that travels through bone and blood like the lowest note on an organ pipe played in a cathedral built underwater. She knows she is running out of time the way a pregnant woman knows labor is near, not by clocks or calendars, but by the way her body has begun to rearrange itself around its passenger. Father Silas brings her the final box at dusk. Though dusk no longer reaches this deep, it is heavier than the others, bound with iron bands rusted the color of dried blood. The lock melted shut as though someone once tried to burn the contents and failed. He does not speak when he sets it down. He only makes the sign of the cross over it, backward, the way the Orthodox do when blessing a grave that has already been opened. Inside is a single Betamax cassette in a cracked plastic case labeled in frantic red marker, Valerio 1983, non vedere. Elena's hands shake as she feeds it into the ancient player scavenged from the audiovisual archives. The screen flickers to life with the sickly green glow of early night vision. Timestamp 14 OCT 1983 03 14 Subjo 7. The corridor looks almost new, only 2 layers of steel plating then, the depression barely visible, like a bruise just beginning to form. 6 men enter frame. 5 wear the purple-trimmed cassocks of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The 6th, tall, thin, aristocratic face lined with the kind of certainty that borders on madness, is Monsignor Antonio Valerio, chief exorcist to Paul VI, and the man who once drove a demon out of a nun using nothing but the rite of 1614 and a relic from the true cross. They carry no cameras, no recorders, only the tools of their terrible trade, a leather case containing the Roman ritual bound in human skin. Rumor says it was tanned from a heretic burned in 1599. A chalice filled with water from the Jordan mixed with the tears of Saint Monica, in a silver aspergillum that once belonged to Saint Pius V. Valerio stands before the door, places his palm against the metal with the confidence of a man who has faced legion and won. He begins the rite. His voice is beautiful, clear, resonant, the Latin rolling off his tongue like thunder over the Alps. The others answer in perfect unison, their breath fogging in the sudden cold that drops the temperature 20 degrees in seconds. Frost feathers across the lens. The depression in the door begins to swell outward, slowly, deliberately. The metal groans like a woman in labor. Valerio does not falter. He raises the aspergillum and flicks holy water against the steel. Where it strikes, the droplets freeze instantly into perfect black pearls that roll upward and vanish into the ceiling. The rite continues. The 5 assistants begin to bleed from the ears, thin streams of crimson that run down their necks and soak their collars without them noticing. Their voices never waver. Valerio reaches the climax, the direct command of exorcism. Exi, spiritus immunde, exi, octavo angelus sine nomini, per sanguinem agni immaculati, ego te impero, exi. It's as the door answers, not with sound, with movement. The depression presses outward until the steel tears along microscopic seams. revealing beneath it a glistening membrane the color of afterbirth. It pulses once, twice, then splits open like a vertical mouth. Something looks out. The camera feed distorts, as though the lens itself is screaming. Valerio is lifted off his feet, not by hands, but by the sudden absence of gravity beneath him. His body folds backward at an impossible angle, spine arching until his head nearly touches his heels. The assistants drop to their knees, mouths open in perfect O's of horror, blood now pouring from eyes, noses, ears. Valerio's voice changes. It is no longer his. It is every child who ever died unborn, speaking in perfect harmony. You opened the wrong womb. The membrane widens. A hand emerges, adult size. But the skin is soft, new, the fingers still curled in fetal position. It reaches for Valerio's face, touches his cheek with terrible tenderness, then pulls. Valerio's body folds forward into the opening like paper, bones cracking wetly, cassock tearing as though the door is swallowing him whole. The last thing visible is his face, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that has no sound, before the membrane closes over him with a soft, wet kiss. The 5 assistants collapse, dead, their bodies arranged in a perfect octagon around the door, faces turned inward, eyes boiled white. The camera feed continues for another 33 seconds. In that time, the door seals itself. No tear, no seam, only a faint handprint on the inside. Visible for one frame, Valerio's, palm outward, fingers splayed in eternal supplication. The tape ends. The laboratory is silent except for Silas's ragged breathing. Elena stares at the blank screen, feeling the thing inside her shift position, pressing upward against her diaphragm as though trying to see what she has just seen. Then it begins, slow, deliberate, from somewhere far below, through layers of stone and steel and 42 years of denial, comes the knocking. Knock, pause, knock, pause, knock. It is not random. It is a heartbeat, human as adult, perfectly spaced, 60 beats per minute. The rhythm of a man who has been waiting, conscious, alive, on the other side of a door that was never meant to open. Silas whimpers and curls into a ball. Elena stands, walks to the monitor, places her branded palm against the screen where Valerio disappeared. The knocking stops. For one terrible moment, there is only silence, then a voice, not through speakers, but directly inside her skull, intimate as a lover's whisper, aged 42 years in darkness. Elena, I kept it company. It's almost big enough now. Let me out. Let us both out. The bone key between her breasts begins to weep blood. Chapter 12. The silence after the screams. The silence that follows the screams is worse than the screams themselves. It is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of listening. A vast, patient attention that presses against the eardrums like water at the bottom of a well, thick and cold and ancient. Elena has learned to dread it more than any noise, the way it fills the lungs with the weight of things unsaid, the way it makes the skin prickle with the certainty that something is tasting your fear from the inside out. She stands alone in the corridor now, the bone key hanging heavy between her breasts, its warmth no longer comforting but accusatory, like a child's hand clutching too tight. Father Silas refused to follow her this far. He collapsed at the top of the spiral stairs. curling into himself with the fetal helplessness of a man who has seen his own death and knows it wears his face. She left him there without pity. Pity is a luxury she can no longer afford. The thing inside her has begun to feed on softer emotions, digesting them into the cold, efficient fuel of inevitability. The door looms ahead, 7 layers thick now, the metal scarred with the desperate welds of 7 terrified popes. The depression in the center has grown monstrous, swollen outward until it resembles a pregnancy in its final, impossible month. The steel stretched thin and translucent, veined with faint blue lines that pulse in time with her own heart. Or perhaps it is the other way around. She no longer trusts the rhythm in her chest. She has come for answers, or for proof, or perhaps simply because the thing inside her demanded it, with a pressure behind her eyes that felt like birth in reverse. The files from 1983, the ones Silas smuggled out in trembling hands, spoke of 3 priests who did not die cleanly. Their bodies were found arranged in the octagonal pattern Michelangelo drew but never admitted to, limbs twisted into impossible angles, flesh torn open as though something had reached inside and rearranged the architecture of their souls. The official report claimed instantaneous death by unknown traumatic force. The photographs were burned. The witnesses were reassigned to monasteries in Antarctica that do not officially exist. But Elena has learned that in the Vatican, death is rarely the end. It is merely a change of address. She places her palm against the lowest weld, the one added after 1983, the metal still bearing faint scorch marks from the blowtorch that sealed it. The steel is warm, almost feverish, and beneath her touch she feels the faintest vibration, like a cat purring in its sleep, or a throat trying to remember how to speak. The silence deepens. It is the silence of a confessional after the last sin has been named and found unforgivable. She leans closer. The metal tastes of iron and old tears when she presses her lips to it, a kiss she does not remember deciding to give. And then she hears it, not with her ears, but with the bones of her inner ear. The way a drowning woman hears the sea inside a seashell, whispers, not from behind the door, from inside the walls themselves. The stone here is ancient tough, porous, honeycombed with the graves of saints and sinners who were bricked up alive when the basilica was young. The whispers rise through those pores like breath through a corpse's teeth. 3 voices, distinct, alive. The first is Father Marco, the youngest, only 31 in 1983, the one who specialized in Marian apparitions and still believed in mercy. His voice is raw, as though his throat was torn out and never quite healed. It took my tongue first, but I learned to speak with the stone. The second is Monsignor Ricci, the theologian, the one who argued that angels could not fall twice. His whisper is dry, intellectual, even in agony. The sound of pages turning in a library that has been burning for 42 years. We are the ribs now, the octagon's living supports. Feel how we hold the weight. The third voice is the worst. Father Domenico, the exorcist's assistant, the one who carried the holy water that turned to blood in his hands. His whisper is wet, intimate, the sound of lips moving against the inside of a womb. Elena, we waited for you. The 8th needs 8 ribs. We are 3. You will bring the rest. She jerks away, but the whispers follow, rising through the floor, through her soles, into her spine. The walls begin to sweat, not water. Something thicker, darker, that smells of myrrh and amniotic fluid left too long in the sun, where it touches the stone. The tuff softens, becomes almost flesh-like, pulsing gently. She backs away until her shoulders hit the opposite wall and feels it give, not stone, skin, warm, living skin stretched over the ancient rock like a drum. She cannot move. The wall breathes against her back, slow, deliberate inhalations that match the rhythm of the swollen door. From inside the wall, Father Marco's voice, tender now, almost loving. Press your ear here, sister. Listen to how we sing for the child. Against her will, her body obeys. She turns, places her ear against the warm, yielding surface. The whisper that comes is not from 1983. It is from the exact moment Valerio was pulled inside, the moment the membrane closed over his screaming face. But the voice that speaks her name is not Valerio's. It is all three priests, speaking in perfect, wet unison, their tongues moving against the inside of the stone like blind worms seeking light. Elena Maria Moretti, we kept him warm for you. He never stopped screaming your name. He's ready now. Come closer. Let us show you how alive we still are. The wall ripples. A hand presses outward from inside the stone, not breaking through, but pushing the surface into the shape of fingers. Then a palm, then a face. 3 faces, layered. Marco's young and terrified, Ricci's stern and scholarly, Domenico's gentle and mad. They smile with mouths that have no lips, only the wet red of exposed muscle, and they begin to sing, not with voices, with the sound of bones grinding against stone as they try to reach her. The corridor fills with the wet, intimate music of living men trying to crawl out of their own graves after 42 years of being the wall. Elena screams. The sound is swallowed instantly, as though the corridor itself has learned to feed. Chapter 13. The Cardinal's Final Breath. The rain has not stopped for 3 days. A relentless November downpour that turns the Vatican's ancient courtyards into shallow lakes, reflecting the bruised purple of the sky, as though the heavens themselves are hemorrhaging in slow motion. Elena crosses the Cortile di San Damaso with her coat pulled tight around her swelling form, the fabric straining across her abdomen where the 8th rib has begun to curve inward like a question mark carved from living bone. She moves carefully now, one hand cradling the subtle weight that was not there a week ago, the other clutching the bone key that hangs between her breasts on its leather cord, warm and pulsing like a second. More honest heart. The Swiss guards salute as she passes, but their eyes slide away from her midsection with the practiced avoidance of men who have learned to recognize curses when they see them walking in human skin. The cardinal's apartment is on the 3rd floor of the Apostolic Palace, a suite of rooms that smell of old books and older regrets. The air thick with the scent of beeswax candles burned down to their last inch, and the faint, sweet rot of a body that has already begun to forget it was ever alive. The windows are shuttered against the storm, but water still finds its way in, trickling down the ancient glass in thin rivulets that look like tears from eyes too tired to weep properly. Elena closes the door behind her with a soft click that echoes too loudly in the hush, the sound of a coffin lid settling into place. Gregorio Lamberti lies propped against a mountain of pillows embroidered with the Lamberti family crest, 3 mountains and a cross, now stained dark where his mouth has bled in the night. He is a skeleton wrapped in scarlet silk, the cardinal's robes hanging on him like funeral drapery on a corpse that has not yet realized it is dead. His breathing is the shallow rasp of bellows with holes burned through them. Each inhale a small, desperate theft from the air. The oxygen mask dangles from one ear like a forgotten noose. He does not open his eyes when she enters. He does not need to. He knows the sound of her footsteps now, the slight hitch on the left, where the thing inside her has begun to press against her sciatic nerve, the soft drag of the bone key against fabric, the wetter, heavier rhythm of her breath as her lungs make room for something that is not lungs. Elena pulls the single chair closer, the legs scraping across the marble with a sound like bones dragged over stone. She sits, folds her hands over the curve that was once flat and scholarly and is now undeniably, terrifyingly maternal. The room is warm, too warm for November, but cold seeps from the cardinal's body in waves, as though death has already begun to refrigerate him from the inside out. His lips move, no sound at first, only the faint click of teeth against teeth, the dry tongue trying to remember its purpose. She leans forward. The candle on the bedside table gutters, stretching tall and thin, the flame turning the color of old bruises. His eyes open. They are not eyes anymore. They are holes, perfect circles of darkness that go all the way through, revealing not the wall behind, but something vast and starless and waiting. He smiles. The expression stretches his skin until it splits at the corners of his mouth. Tiny beads of blood welling up like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence no one wants to finish. His voice, when it comes, is not a voice. It is the sound of 8 throats speaking with one tongue, layered and ancient and unbearably tender. It is not a demon. A pause. The candle flame bends sideways, though there is no wind. It is the 8th angel, the one God erased from memory. Elena feels the words land inside her, like stones dropped into deep water, the ripples spreading outward until they touch the thing curled beneath her ribs. It answers with a sudden, violent twist that steals her breath and brings tears to her eyes, not from pain, but from recognition, the kind of recognition a mother feels when her child kicks for the first time and she understands, with absolute clarity, that she is no longer alone in her own body. Gregorio's hand rises, slow, trembling, the skin paper-thin over bones that look carved from ivory, and closes around her wrist. His thumb finds the exact center of the octagonal brand on her palm and presses until she feels the bones grind. The octagon, he whispers, and now his voice is only his own again, cracked and human and full of the most terrible pity. Was never a prison. It was a forgetting. 8 sides, 8 angels, 8 notes in the song that held the world together before the world learned shame. The 8th looked into the abyss and saw what love might become if it was allowed to go too far. It saw the child that would unmake the father by becoming him. So God unmade the 8th instead, scratched it from every scroll, erased it from every quire. But forgetting is not the same as never was. The eighth remembered, and it waited. His grip tightens until Elena feels her pulse in his fingers, or perhaps his pulse in hers. She can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. Michelangelo saw it in his dreams. Gregorio continues, his voice gaining strength from somewhere deeper than lungs. The octagon came to him the night he finished the Last Judgment. He woke screaming, covered in blood that was not his. He drew the chamber beneath Saint Peter's exactly as he saw it. 8 walls, 8 ribs, 8 months of gestation for something that was never meant to be born forward. He begged Clement VII to let him seal it. They thought he was mad. They let him, and every pope since has added another layer, another lie, another welds, because the alternative, he coughs. The sound is wet, final, black fluid, thick as tar, sweet as myrrh, bubbles from his lips and runs down his chin in perfect rivulets that form tiny octagons on the white sheet. His body goes rigid, then, with a sound like ice cracking across a winter lake. He sits bolt upright. The movement is impossible, smooth, wrong. His spine arches backward until the back of his head nearly touches his heels, vertebrae popping like knuckles. The sheet falls away, revealing a chest collapsed inward as though something has been hollowed out from the inside. Ribs sunken into perfect octagonal patterns that mirror the brand on Elena's skin. His head turns toward her, slowly, lovingly, with a soft clicking of bones that have forgotten how to be dead. The eyes are empty, not closed, gone, perfect black circles that drink the light, revealing behind them a vastness full of wings and weeping. He smiles. The expression stretches his face until the skin splits along the hairline, blood welling up in tiny, perfect beads that roll upward into his hair instead of down when he speaks. It is with the voice of every child who was never allowed to be born, layered and harmonious and unbearably gentle. Thank you for the cradle, Mummy. Only one more breath and then we begin. The corpse lies back down with the same impossible grace. The candle extinguishes itself in a single puff of sweet, placental smoke in the darkness. Elena feels the 8th rib complete itself inside her chest, growing from her own sternum, curving inward with a soft, wet click to form the final wall of the octagon that has been waiting 500 years for its mother to arrive. Chapter 14. The door opens, 33 centimeters. The night has teeth. Elena feels them sinking into her one by one as she descends the spiral stairs for what she knows, without knowing how she knows, will be the last time as herself. The bone key is no longer an object. It has become an extension of her skeleton, fused to the sternum by threads of black hair that have woven through skin and cartilage like ivy claiming a crumbling wall. Each step sends a jolt through her body, a reminder that the 8th rib has fully formed now, curving inward to cradle the thing that kicks with the patient insistence of something that has waited centuries for the perfect moment to be born backward. She has left Silas behind in the laboratory, curled on the floor amid the shattered glass and blood that spelled her name in languages no longer spoken. He was whispering the Jesus prayer in Greek when she closed the door, his voice cracking on every Lord have mercy, as though mercy were a currency long devalued in this place. She did not say goodbye. Goodbyes require the belief that there will be someone left to remember them. The corridor at level 7 is warmer than it has any right to be, the air thick and humid like the inside of a lung. The 7 layers of steel plating gleam wetly under her flashlight. Each weld a scar from a different Pope's terror. The depression in the center has grown monstrous, swollen to the size of a birthing pelvis. The metal stretched so thin she can see faint movement beneath it, shadows that slide and reform like fish in dark water. She kneels. The bone key fits into no lock, yet when she presses it against the center of the depression, the metal yields like flesh, a soft, wet sound, part sigh, part kiss, as the key sinks in up to the carved fetal fingers. The door does not open outward. It opens inward, not with a creak of hinges or a groan of tortured steel, but with the slow, deliberate parting of something that was never meant to part. The 7 layers peel back like petals of a black iron flower, folding into themselves with impossible geometry, revealing not a room, but a vastness. The space beyond is larger than the Vatican, much larger. The corridor's flashlight beam should die against a wall meters away, but it stretches on, swallowed by an octagonal chamber that defies every law of architecture and physics Elena has ever studied. The walls recede into darkness that has depth and texture, veined with faint blue light, like the inside of a womb seen from within. 8 ribs of stone arch upward to meet at a boss that is not a boss, but an eye, massive, lidless. The pupil a perfect void that drinks her light and gives nothing back. The air that rushes out is warm, wet, alive. It smells of birth, not the clinical birth of hospitals with their bright lights and measured cries. But the ancient kind, blood and straw and terror, in a stable where no one thought to bring clean linen. It fills her lungs, coats her tongue, makes her eyes water with the sweetness of amniotic fluid and the iron tang of afterbirth. She steps across the threshold. The door seals behind her with the soft finality of a mouth closing. There is no going back. The chamber breathes around her, slow, tidal, the way a mother breathes when the contractions are still far apart, but inevitable. The floor is not stone. It is warm, yielding slightly under her weight, covered in a thin membrane that pulses gently, veined with the same blue light that threads the walls. When she looks down, she sees shadows moving beneath it, tiny forms curled tight, waiting. The 8 alcoves are there, just as Michelangelo drew them in his madness, but the linen-wrapped figures are no longer desiccated. They are fresh. Father Marco, Father Ricci, Father Domenico, their bodies arranged in perfect octagonal symmetry, skin pale and glistening as though newly born. Their eyes are open, milk white, fixed on her with the serene adoration of saints who have finally understood their purpose. From their mouths issue faint threads of black hair that weave across the floor toward her, seeking in the center, suspended by chains that grow from the ceiling like umbilical cords, hangs Monsignor Valerio. He is alive. After 42 years, his body is untouched by time, skin smooth, hair dark, the aristocratic features she knows from photographs preserved in perfect, terrible youth. He hangs upside down, head lolling, arms spread in crucifixion pose, but his chest rises and falls in the slow rhythm she has come to recognize as the eighth angel's breath. His eyes open. They are her eyes, but ancient. He smiles with her mouth. Elena, he says, and the voice is hers layered with his, intimate as a lover's whisper against the inside of her skull. You came. I kept it warm for you. It learned your name from my screams. The chains lower him slowly, lovingly, until his feet touch the membrane floor. He stands, walks toward her with the awkward grace of a man who has forgotten gravity. The crack appears in the floor between them, not a crack, but a parting. The membrane splits with a wet, tearing sound, revealing darkness below that has depth and hunger. From that darkness, a hand rises, Valerio's hand, but not the one attached to his body. This one is still warm from 42 years of being pressed against something that should never be touched. It shoots upward through the crack, fast as a striking snake, fingers splayed, nails black and curled like fetal claws. It seizes her ankle. The grip is gentle, possessive. The skin is warm, alive, pulsing with the exact rhythm of her own heart. Valerio, no. The thing wearing Valerio kneels before her, places his free hand on the curve of her abdomen, and presses his cheek against the place where the eighth rib has locked into place from inside her. The child answers, a kick, hard, deliberate. The membrane floor ripples outward in perfect octagonal waves. The 8 alcoves begin to weep blood that runs upward into the ceiling. Valerio looks up at her with eyes that are no longer eyes but windows into the vastness she glimpsed when the door first opened inward. It's time, he whispers with her voice. Time to be born the right way, backward, into what was before the word. The hand around her ankle tightens, pulls, not hard, just enough. She feels herself begin to fall, not down, but into the space that is larger than the Vatican, larger than the world, larger than forgiveness. Chapter 15, and the next pope will still refuse. The election of Pope Innocent XIV takes place in absolute secrecy, as all conclaves do, but this one carries a hush deeper than ritual, a silence that tastes of iron and old milk, the kind that settles in the throat and refuses to be swallowed. The cardinals file into the Sistine Chapel on a morning in late November 2025, when the sky over Rome hangs low and bruised, the rain falling upward in faint, impossible wisps that vanish before touching the cobblestones. They do not speak of the woman who vanished 3 weeks ago. They do not need to. Her name has become one of those Vatican silences, like the third secret or the exact location of certain tombs, the kind that is never written down because once written, it might demand to be read aloud in the apostolic palace, in a room with no windows and walls lined with lead. The new pope sits alone for the first time with the weight of the keys. He is 71, Argentine by birth, a man who once washed the feet of prisoners and spoke of mercy as though it were a living thing. His hands tremble only slightly as he inserts the small silver key into the drawer marked only with an octagon scratched so deeply into the wood it looks burned. Inside is a single USB drive, black, unmarked, wrapped in a linen cloth that smells faintly of myrrh and something sweeter, afterbirth left too long in the dark. He plugs it into the secure laptop, that has never been connected to any network. The file opens automatically. Security footage. Timestamped 11 DEC 2026 033333. 1 year in the future. The image is crystal clear, high definition, the kind installed after the scandals of the early century. The octagonal chamber, the door, open inward, a wound that has never healed. Elena stands at the threshold, or what is left of her, body swollen to the point of translucence, skin stretched tight over the impossible geometry of 8 ribs that now form a perfect cage around the thing inside. Her face is serene, almost luminous, the black fetal hair spreading from her palms up her arms like living tattoos, weaving patterns that hurt to follow. The bone key is no longer around her neck. It has been absorbed. The carved fetal fingers, now protruding from her sternum like a grotesque brooch. She is smiling, not the smile of a woman in labor, the smile of a woman who has finally understood the joke. Valerio stands before her, unchanged after 42 years, or perhaps changed into something that time no longer recognizes. His hands rest on her belly with the tenderness of a lover, or a midwife, or a priest administering extreme unction to the world itself. The thing inside her moves, visibly, a ripple that travels from pelvis to throat, as though something is turning head down, preparing. Valerio leans in and kisses her forehead with lips that leave a perfect octagonal bruise. Then the pull begins, not violent, inevitable. Elena's feet leave the membrane floor. She is drawn backward into the vastness, arms outstretched, hair floating as though underwater. Her mouth opens. No scream, only a sigh, a long maternal exhale that carries the weight of every child who was never allowed to be. The door closes from the inside, seals without seam. The chamber empties. The footage ends. Pope Innocent XIV sits in the darkness that follows. The only light, the pale glow of the laptop screen, reflecting in eyes that have seen too much mercy, turned inside out. He does not move for a long time. Then, slowly, deliberately, he opens the drawer again, takes out the welding orders, signs them with a hand that no longer trembles. The order is simple: add another layer, make it 8. And beneath his signature, in handwriting that is not quite his own, appear the words, "She was the door, we were always the lock." The laptop screen flickers once more. A new file appears. Timestamp 20 NOV 2025 033333. Today, the camera is not in the Vatican. It is here, in this room, pointed at him. The Pope looks up, directly into the lens, directly into you. The screen goes black. 5 seconds of silence, absolute. Then they exhale, long, warm, directly into your ear. The whisper that follows is not from the speakers. It is inside the bone, behind your breath. You're still listening. Good, because the next door is already under your house. The nightmare you thought ended with Elena never ended. It only changed mothers. If this story crawled under your skin and refused to leave, tell me in the comments. When was the last time you heard breathing that wasn't yours? Subscribe if you're brave enough for what remembers next. The octagon is never complete. There is always room for one more rib. Sleep well, if you can.